introducing this for us, and then we'll kick it over to him in a second here. But as you just heard, we are recording this. If that's okay with everyone, if that's not okay with anyone, drop me a chat in the window directly to me if you like. I'm now realizing my video wasn't started. Sorry about that. So as many of you know, we have done annual surveys querying our members about various different aspects about PDActive, how we're doing, the different things we are doing, the different things you'd like us to be doing that we're not doing. But this is the first year that we've actually decided to take that response data and coalesce it into a digestible format and then present it back to you to show you what you guys have said, but also to show you what we've been doing about that. So this was Chad's idea, and it's a terrific idea. We hope that many of you on this call tonight had some of that feedback, and if you didn't, that's quite all right. That's not a requirement. We will have other annual surveys coming up soon enough, so you'll have another chance to provide feedback to us. As we're going along, Jen will be monitoring. Jen Kaplan is our Director of Operations and Programming, and she will be monitoring the chat. She will also be admitting people in from the waiting room. Thanks, Jen, for doing that. If you have questions along the way, by the way, we will walk through a PowerPoint presentation that Chad will share his screen to show you. He'll present some of the slides. I'll speak to some of the slides, and we will try to save 15 plus minutes for Q&A at the end. If you have questions along the way, feel free to drop those into Zoom's chat tool. If you don't know what the chat tool is, mouse down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you should see the tool tray pop up if it wasn't already visible. And for me, the third function, the third feature from the left is chat. If you click on chat, it should open another little dialog box to the right of your screen, or you can move it around to get it out of the way of the visible part of your screen, and you can drop chats in there. So I hope that makes sense. Without further ado, why don't I turn this over to you, Chad, and you can start sharing screen and walk through the first portion of the deck.
You, Todd. Okay. This is our 2020 Stakeholder Survey Response Analysis. And wouldn't you know it? Here we go. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the survey results, the demographics, current programs and services, new programs and services, other comments. And then we're going to discuss the recent action that PDActive has taken in response to the survey feedback. And then we've got next steps. So first, a little bit about the survey. We started doing online annual surveys in 2019. So this is the third one. We send it to the entire membership list. So there's many hundreds. And in each of the year, we received about just shy of 200 responses, and that's what we received this past year. While we have many more members in the database, we think the most engaged members probably provided most of the feedback. So, so many of you on this call have provided the feedback, and many like you. So we wish everyone could have responded, but we think almost 200 is a pretty good representation. So demographics, otherwise known as who is PDActive. So relationship with Parkinson's disease, you can see that 3/4 of everyone who took the survey is diagnosed with Parkinson's. We also have care partners in blue. We also have people with Parkinsonism, and then a variety of other categories. People who work within the PD community might be class instructors or PDActive employees. And we have friends and families, etc. So age distribution. I love these slides. The picture tells a pretty good story. You can see we've got people in their 50s to people in their late 80s. The median, that's the middle age where half are above and half are below. It's still fixed at about 72 years, which it's been for the last couple of years. So we get a lot of new people. We get some people falling off the radar, but that's our age distribution. Years since diagnosis, that also has been relatively uniform. We have a lot of new members who are new to Parkinson's, and they tend to be very engaged with Pediactive. But we've got people who are getting on to 30 years. And you can see the distribution. So speak up if, or raise a chat if you think I'm going too slow or too fast. Whoop. So geographic distribution by zip code. This one is interesting. This plot, the height of the little box represents how many people in that zip code took the survey. And you can see we're spread across the country. You can see on the left, there's the Bay Area where it's really high. And I'm going to zoom in on that in a minute. Here's California and nearby. And here's the Bay Area. The height, these bars aren't exactly where you live. It's what this mapping tool shows as the location of your zip code. You know, so it's pretty close. So there's one, you know, bar for all of Alameda, for example. So what's really interesting about this is if you look at how this has changed in the last 3 years. Zip 3 is the first 3 digits of the zip code, and it corresponds to a geographic area. So the number of people outside of our primary, what was historically our primary service area, mostly Oakland, Berkeley, a little bit of Alameda. Well, you know, if you looked at this in 2019 or before, almost everyone had a zip code starting with 95, 945, 946, 947. But look how, with the pandemic, we've really gotten a lot of people from outlying areas. So a lot are from the Bay Area still, San Francisco, East Bay, South Bay, etc. But you saw in that first slide of the US, how many people throughout the country. And it's all because of the Zoom convenience. Which race or ethnicity best describes you? We've asked this for the last 2 years. You can see we are primarily, well, we're serving mostly white Caucasian, and we have a small amount Asian or Black or African American, and then some small amounts in other
larger
categories.
share of the vote.
This is something that we've looked at, and we want to serve more people. And this is important, an important slide for us. It tells us that we're serving one community well, but we have work to do reaching out to others. There's more on this later. If you look at, we just have the last 2 years, the percent of survey responders who are non-white. It's gone up a little bit. We have more on this later in some of the actions we're taking, but this is clearly, as I said before, identified an opportunity for us to serve more people. All right, the next section is feedback on current programs and services. So this question, we asked people to rate how important pediatric services of various categories are. And what I've highlighted in black, the black ovals, is the people that responded that it was important, somewhat important, important, or very important. And so you can see Pediatric News and Information, was the most people said that is important to them. But every one of these categories, the speaker series, the classes, the support groups, community events, and social activities, had a lot of people that rated them as important to them. So just because pediatric social activities is not as high as the speaker series, for example, doesn't mean there aren't a lot of people. The majority of pediatric survey responses said they were important to them. This is sort of a busy slide. I hope it's clear. We've focused during the pandemic on our eventual transition to transition back to in-person activities. And we've struggled with that. At first, people had a lot of reservations about Zoom. More and more people are feeling comfortable with Zoom. There's still people who prefer in-person activities. And what you can see here is in 3 different categories of services programming that we provide, you can see how people have responded. Movement classes, there's a fair number. The yellow category is people that sometimes want to take in person and sometimes online, and the green is they prefer in person. So there's a significant number of people that want to take the movement classes in person, and there's also a significant number that want this in support groups and speaker events, but not quite as much. Support groups in particular, a lot of people want sometimes in person, sometimes online, but only 6% of the people prefer to have support groups in person. So to those 6%, that's very important. But we continue to struggle with the balancing act of the problems with COVID and the conveniences of Zoom, and this is something that again we've got more on later for how we've tried to respond to these preferences. Next question, with so much programming remaining online, which in-person activities would you value? And you can see here that we've got a lot of activities that people really like to do a lot, and they've created opportunities for more in-person social interaction. So hikes and walks, picnics, classes are the three biggest. But you can see there's people that want all these in-person activities. And my favorite, pickleball, down near the bottom. We ask questions on new programs and services. What types of new classes should we consider offering? The most interest was in gait and balance training. High intensity interval training was popular. Other Zumba, cycling. You can see this distribution. On all these questions, by the way, where there was an other category, people provided response in free-form text. And it's hard to summarize here, but we've analyzed all that as well. We have a lot of support groups. We have regular support groups. We have young onset support groups. We have care partner support groups. The question is, what types of new support groups or meetup groups would people be interested in attending? You can see this is similar to last year. Support groups just for women with Parkinson's is a hot one. Hiking group, book article discussion group. Support group just for the recently diagnosed is an interesting one. We have that one's come up a number of years in the past. People who live alone, dining. We asked for topics that people were particularly keen to learn more about in either speaker forums or community roundtables. And Todd Morris did an incredible job of taking all these free-form responses and categorizing and analyzing them. And you can see here, a lot of people looking for speakers on latest research, prevention, exercise and nutrition, success stories, latest meds and applications, continuing care, finances, etc., coping with advanced Parkinson's, DBS, dyskinesia, gait, motor symptoms, non-motor symptoms, and so on. A lot of people have a lot of topics. We've been looking at the fee structure for classes for a couple of years now, and we want to be more inclusive, and we want to have a broader reach. And we asked the question, how you would feel if certain online pediatric classes were offered free of charge, paid for by Pediatric. The introduction to Zoom classes allowed this possibility. It's not something that could be done with in-person classes so easily with the expensive studio rentals and with more limits to the number of people. But we wanted to explore this, and you can see the vast majority of people would be supportive of this. If we were to transition to classes free of charge, paid for by us, it would need to be supported by donations. And you can see there's a lot of support for this as well, with people who are saying they'd be glad to donate to make this happen. And you can see 20 some odd % of people said this would allow me to take more classes. We think it's actually even more than that, because there's probably a lot of people who are not fully engaged in PD Active, or were not fully engaged with PD Active, because the cost of the classes was prohibitive. And so they're not even filling out the survey, because they're just not, because they see a lot of services that are too expensive or were too expensive. So we think that there's even more people that could be served more. And that's what we want to do. We want to help people with Parkinson's. Some people worry that it would make the classes too large, but again, these are just Zoom classes. We had a lot of free-form response questions. We reviewed them in detail, read every line. Some comments were private. It's a little hard to present in a forum like this, but there were many insightful and actionable comments and suggestions, and we on the board read every one of them and took them into consideration and took action where appropriate. So we hear you, and we take your feedback seriously, and we've taken a lot of action as a response to the survey feedback. And I'm going to turn this over to Todd Morrish, who's going to walk through the next couple of slides.
Thanks, Chad. So it's nice when organizations we belong to ask us for our feedback, and it's nice when those organizations respond back to us on what some of that feedback was and format it so nicely like this. But when the rubber really hits the road is when those organizations take action on that feedback. And so this is our chance to show you what we've been doing with that feedback and how we've been trying to grow our organization and improve it. So in response to feedback on classes specifically, we've introduced a handful of new classes, including the Neuro Movement class and the PD Fit Club. I've taken that Neuro Movement class and I like it a lot. It's great. We've added a weekly class of an additional Tai Chi class of in addition to the one we've already got on Tuesdays, focusing on gait. I take that one as well. We've maintained focus on favorite classes such as yoga for PD and tremolo. So those are still active and going strong. And then all PD Active online classes are now available without fees, as Chad was just discussing a couple of slides ago. So that's exciting. And that, again, that's part of engaging more members, growing our organization in the membership category, but also diversity and making sure that nobody's turned away for lack of funds. So next slide, Chad. And then in response to feedback on support groups, we've done a few neat things there. We've continued all the existing support groups after receiving strong positive feedback on those. So people have liked those and they're wanting us to continue those. That's terrific. We will do that. The general PD support group, the YOPD or the Young Onset group, 2 different care partner support groups. There's an adult children of partners, parents with PD support group. If you didn't know about all those, there you are right there. We've started a Spanish language specific support group, which is getting a lot of attention. So that's another way that we're trying to diversify our membership growth. And we've also added alternate facilitators to help with the very popular main support group. And as a reminder, if you've got any questions on these things along the way, do feel free to pop those into the chat feature. And I know someone chimed in and said, it's hard for us to type. I can hear you on that. So wait till the end and we'll be sure to call you out and let you vocalize your questions at the end. In response to feedback for more in-person activities, This is neat as the pandemic starts to wane, hopefully more and more, we're able to do this more and more. We've added a second session of PD pickleball. We do this down at the Bushrod Park at Telegraph and Shattuck, is it, Chad? Between Telegraph and Shattuck?
Yes, between Telegraph and Shattuck on 59.
A lot of fun. We do that twice monthly. Continued support for the weekly hiking group. We've convened more picnics. We've had a recent picnic in Berkeley at the oh, Jen, remind me of the name of the park. What was it called?
Live Oak Park.
Right. So that was fun. People liked that enough that they started providing feedback on the spot and saying we should do more of these. So now we're considering doing 2 picnics a year, one in the spring, one in the fall. So stay tuned on that. We've reintroduced the info fair, even though it's harder to do when the pandemic was strong. So we had to take a year or so off. But the last one was held up at Temescal, where all of our vendors can come out and show you their wares and share their brochures with you. Next slide. And then the speaker forums and roundtables. So this is sort of my bailiwick, and Chad showed you that colorful round pie chart. It is neat doing that analysis because it's a matter of taking all of your very free-form feedback, their free-form responses, and trying to assign them to categories so that we can get at least that pie graph displayed to show at least what the primary topics are that you guys wanted to learn more about. And chief among those were, of course, looking for a cure. Wouldn't we all love to have a webinar tomorrow that told us what the cure for PD is? But others are caregiving, which we just did a recent roundtable session on. Speech and swallowing we did recently. These are all the ones that we've done recently, of course. Nutrition, pharmacology, clinical trials, etc. I won't read all of those. You can read them yourselves. I will tell you that one of the pieces of feedback we got in this particular question was more information on sleep disorders around PD, and then also hallucinations, delusions, and dementia around PD. Those are both scheduled for January and March of this coming year, respectively. So January 21st, you'll be seeing this in the newsletter, so you don't have to scramble for a pencil and paper now. But January 21st, Saturday, we'll be with Liza Ashcroft, who has spoken to our group in years past, and will give us an update on sleep disorders around PD. And then March 14th will be a team of doctors from University College London telling us about hallucinations, dementia, and all around PD. So that's what's coming up. Next slide, Chad. Volunteering, always a popular topic. We're actually very thrilled and pleased with the number of folks that are eager to help volunteer and help us put on events. Most recently, we were at the Healthy Senior Living event for Oakland at the Oakland Zoo, and that's what this picture on the right is portraying. So 24 people, for example, have offered to volunteer in the survey. That's awesome. And we track all of those, and we try to reach out to folks as soon as we can to make sure that they know that we're paying attention. 10 of those have participated recently in making PD Active events successful. And then here you go. If you'd like to volunteer yourselves, contact Kathy at that email address, programdirector@pdactive.org. And Jen, if you wouldn't mind pasting that into the chat window so that when we leave this slide, people can grab it out of the chat, that would be great. Thank you to all of you. If you've volunteered, we really appreciate you. And if you haven't yet, give it a go. These events can be really fun to do. Next slide. Yeah, so this is letting you know that, as I said at the top of the session, if you haven't had a chance to provide feedback and you're just sort of learning now what we do with that feedback, very soon we'll be offering up our next annual stakeholder survey, and that'll be your next chance to tell us what you think. Any more slides there, Chad? I like the arrows on this. Where'd you get those arrows? Those are cool.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, I don't see any questions in the chat, but this is a chance for us to start fielding questions if you've got them. So what we can do, I know Ian had a question. If Ian's still on, let's see, is Ian out there? Don't see Ian. Oh yeah, there's Ian. Ian, want to have a chance to throw your question out? You're on mute, by the way, just so you know.
Not only to have a problem typing and moving my mouse, but I have a problem going from mute to unmute.
You're among friends in that category, I promise.
I'm nowhere near your area, but I'm
Oh
from,
yeah, where are you?
I'm from Saskatchewan, Canada.
Oh wow, you might win our longest dial-in distance.
Oh, we need to redo that map.
Yeah, I never even saw Canada up there.
Oh, man.
Rob.
But no, like I've partaken in the surveys, and like I try to find as much information as possible. And one thing you might try to address is like, I've sort of had the privilege of selling my business and building a new home. And my wife and I have designed our home strictly for Parkinson's. There was a facility up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, it's called the Buchanan Center, that they had rooms specifically designed to go and test out toilets, tubs, drawers, doors, levers, doorknobs, also find out what you should use easily or not use easily.
These are model rooms, for example?
Well, it was in a big room and sort of like a door handles. The door handles would all be in one door.
Very cool.
And the toilets would all be lined up side by side. The tubs would all be lined up side by side. It was really neat, and we incorporated a lot of those into our house when we built our house. And as far as planning exercises, like I only live in a small community of 92 people. But when we built our house, we put a gym in the one side of the garage, and there's 6 of us that get together, and we work out to the Power for Parkinson's workout tapes.
PWR.
Yeah, and we also Davis Finney has a lot of nice webinar stuff. So it's maybe not just providing info for on-site, but where to go off-site access would be probably
Why is she barking?
for persons like myself.
Good. That's great, Ian. I know we've got a resources page on our website that, to be completely honest, I have not looked at for the last few weeks, so I don't know what's fresh up there or not, but you might peek at that.
And I always have an issue, not just with the typing with chats. Whenever you go on site to a Parkinson's meeting, when they serve meals, it's always buffet, and that frustrates me too.
Fair enough. Duly noted. Well, good feedback. I'm very intrigued by the designing one's home around a person with Parkinson's needs. That sounds very current and very cool. I like it a lot. Any other questions? We've got still 24 folks dialed in, and that was a lot of info that Chad and I just covered, but we're happy to field any questions or any other feedback you've got. I mean, we can wait for the survey or not, so. No?
Rick, are you saying you have something you want to say? You have to, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm typing. How do you handle requests for who are the best or who are the local medical or other providers? And it must be, I haven't seen any feedback about that. I know that I've often been in groups where one of the main questions is, who do I go to? Who do you recommend as a neurologist? Who's a great physical therapist? Who is there who can help me with my feet? What podiatrist did you know of? Do you get any requests like that? Or has there been any feedback to that?
We get a lot of those requests. We don't publish an official Pediactive recommended list, but what we do is we have a lot of forums where people can ask those questions and respond. So a lot of that happens in the support groups. You know, it's very common for people to ask those questions or for people to just talk about their update or what's going on with them. And someone will say, oh, who is this acupuncturist? And how do I get a hold of them? And so it happens a lot in support groups or in other forums, in-person activities, etc. But we don't have an official list from Pediactive.
Yeah, I second the support group's direction, Rick. It's that those are important questions for all of us, and yet they're sort of personal, subjective, and carrier dependent. So it's hard for us, and we don't want to get in any legal hot water, so we don't want to publish anything that gets anybody in trouble. But support groups are very useful for that, because people can give you their personal feedback in those forums, and then you can do the research on your end to look them up. But support groups are great for that.
And Rick, I see you asked if the slide deck will be available. It'll be available in a few days on the website.
Carrie,
I see Carrie has her
Yeah, hi.
awesomely using the raise hand feature.
Yeah, trying to do too much time on Zoom. So two things. One is, and forgive me if I missed this, I've been trying to wrangle my dogs. But in terms of the basically lack of diversity, and it's interesting as a side note, we went to the Michael J. Fox event this last weekend, and my husband noticed right away that it was mostly white people, and was saying, how are you working to help more people of a diverse background? So my first question is, were there actions or are there actions that are taken? I know you all have talked about that. And then number two is just a huge thank you, because all the board members, you all do so much work for this, and we really appreciate this. So just wanted to say thank you.
Go
You want me to say something about that, or do you want to, Jen?
Go
I can
ahead.
say something, or I
Oh,
can say
good. There
something
you
about
are.
it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Judy.
so President Judy. Hi, Judy.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so this has been a focus for us for the last, I'd say, year and a half at least. We have looked to how can we reach underserved populations in our area, and not that easy. And it's a process. So we have started it. Our Spanish language support group is a step in that direction. We've made contact with Highland Hospital and their neurology department, Casa de la Raza. So we are reaching out to be able to make our services available, and also to understand what the needs are out there. So I think this is something that's true for a lot of groups who are serving in the Parkinson's field there. It's true, you go to any event, and whether it's the Michael J. Fox or Northern California Parkinson's group, and it's predominantly white. So it's an ongoing effort, and anybody who has connections, I would say, in the community, whether it's through your church or your community group or anything, we would welcome some support on reaching out there. Jen, do you want to add anything? Because Jen's been working a lot on this as well.
Yeah, just that we've gotten information out at a lot of the community clinics, and they are referring, getting that out to their Parkinson's patients. So it's slow, but that is happening. And the need is great. Usually when the people call who get the information from their doctor about the Spanish speaking group, a lot of them say, I don't know anybody else who has Parkinson's. So, but there's definitely a lot more to do.
Thank you.
Does that answer your
And
question,
then the
Kim?
other thing is the
Yeah, thank you.
classes, which Chad talked a little bit about, but we did move to making all of the online classes, exercise classes, available without any fees, and that in an effort to make them more accessible to people and for folks to be able to participate in more classes. And so we're moving to this donation model where instead of sort of paying per class, we're hoping that people will donate and become monthly donors to Pediactive to kind of underwrite the classes, because we are now paying the teachers. It's not that the classes became suddenly free. So we're hoping that, as you know, the response in the survey showed that people will support that, and we're hoping that that's the case, and that will mean that more people start taking the classes. But we just started that last month.
Thank you.
And for a shameless plug for our annual appeal, the reason that will be able to continue doing this in the future is when people can make generous donations to PD Active to allow people who can't afford to pay for classes. As Jen said, we're still paying our instructors, or we're continuing to pay our instructors. So don't forget us for the annual appeal, your end of the year donations.
Cool.
Other questions?
Can I just say hi? I'm Joanne. I'm sorry I was late. That wasn't my plan. So I missed all of what has transpired. Will that be summarized later in some way, whatever I missed? Sounds like.
It will. Hi, Joanne. Welcome. And we were talking a lot about you before you joined, but
Yeah, exactly.
yes, we're going to try to get the deck that Chad assembled based on all the feedback and the analysis and the crunching of that those responses posted up on the site. Usually we put it on under the events / past events site. So we'll probably put that link to that in the newsletter coming up.
And actually, now that Joanne is there, I'd like to say that one of the things that was noted in the survey was that that showed how long people had been diagnosed with Parkinson's. There had been a request from several members about that to reach out to people who are newly diagnosed when they reach out to PD Active. And so we now have a small group of volunteers, Joanne among them, who will respond to people who are log into our website and are newly diagnosed and ask to be contacted. So we're offering that as well as part of our services. Thank you, Joanne, and Deborah, who's also on this call.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, it's been interesting. Yeah, it's been good.
Can I ask a quick general question? Are you folks finding that this kind of session is helpful to you? Are you glad to see the feedback that you provided and what we're doing about it?
Yes, definitely.
Thumbs up. Good. All right, great.
Yes.
Good.
I want to just on that same note, do another plug that maybe should have been in the survey but wasn't, which is around political action. And Brooke, who is on this call, took the lead in organizing PD Active around the Michael J. Fox legislation on Parkinson's, on ending Parkinson's. So thank you, Brooke. And with the help of Robin, who's on the board, and Monique, who's on the board but not able to be here. Maybe that should be a question in next year's survey. Sorry, and I see Christopher has a question.
Hi, yes, good evening, everybody. My name is Christopher Flores. I'm a fairly recent member of PD Active, maybe a little over a year ago. And I have to say I've had only positive experiences with PD Active. I've participated in some of the activities only because I'm still working. I hope to do more next year when I'm going to be retired, but everything I found very beneficial. The one thing about the survey, which struck me, was the number of years of engagement with PD Active. It seemed to be in the initial 10 years, and then it seemed to drop off. I'm wondering if there's any insight as to why that's the case. Is it because the disease becomes increasingly more debilitating to preempt participation? Or is it that the services that PD Active provides become less valuable as the disease progresses? It just struck me a little odd that that distribution was heavily biased towards people who are less than 10 years with the disease.
Well, that's a good question. As I mentioned before, it's something that has remained consistent for the last couple of years. Part of what happens with Parkinson's is, most people are first diagnosed in their 70s or 80s. And so, don't have as many years with it. I was diagnosed in my early 50s. I expect to be, on this chart, 20 years from now or more. I expect to be one of those on the right end of the chart. But it's probably all those things that you mentioned. I think, we're getting a lot of new people who are newly diagnosed and who take a lot of action on our services, but we have, plenty of people who've been around 20 or 30 years. Maybe also part of it is, it's a little harder to take a survey if you had Parkinson's for 20 or 30 years.
Okay.
It's hard to
Good
say.
question, though, Christopher. Any other questions?
I have a quick question. This is Carrie Lubin, and it's actually for Ian from Canada. So Ian, I'm very intrigued by a building that could be better suited for someone with Parkinson's. Could you somehow share that organization where you went to see the choices, or?
Well, it's called the Buchanan Center.
Channing?
Buchanan, Buchanan.
Thank you.
He himself was a multimillionaire who had Parkinson's, and he bequeathed a whole bunch of money to the Parkinson's Society. And he was in construction, so they built this. It's just a beautiful facility. I've never seen anything like it. And so when we built our house, it was like we built all our doors extra wide. Everything is a lever. It's all one floor. There's not a step in the place. The showers roll in, roll out. We lowered the light switches by a couple inches in case I'm in a wheelchair, and we raised the light sockets. All our drawers, kitchen cupboards, we don't have cupboards, we have drawers. So they come to me, I just reach in instead of having to reach, stand up, a whole bunch of little things.
Great, thank you, Ian. And one more comment to the entire board is that every time I participate in a class or a lecture series or a forum, I feel better afterwards. So I want to thank you all for that and your hard work so that it helps all of us.
I'd like to say one other thing about to anybody that's new. Sometimes our terminology is we don't expect it to be taken the wrong way, but I was just at a meeting and we were talking about falling and saying, who here has falling issues? And one of the guys spoke up and says, I don't have falling issues, I have standing issues.
That's great. That's great.
That might be a good note to leave on, but any other questions before we do? Dad, any other comments?
There's a question on the chat. Are in-person programs going to replace some that are now Zoom? If so, which and where?
That's a great question. I'll start by fielding it, Chad, and then you can layer on if you like. Speaking from the events perspective, I joined the board just before the pandemic, where we had 1 or 2 in-person events and then shutdown happened. So what's going to be challenging, I mean, it was a challenge enough for some of us to learn how to operate Zoom and to go from an all in-person world to an all online world. Now we've become so good at it over the past 2.5 or 3 years that we're rather comfortable staying in our pajamas and staying at the computer at home and not have to worry about parking or wheelchairs or park, where we might, the directions or Uber or Lyft or whatever. But so as much as we would like to go back to in-person, we're going to have to do that in a careful way where we're maybe doing a bit of a hybrid approach where we've got in-person available, but then we're also simulcasting it for those people that don't want to come in person yet, or they don't, or they're so comfortable with their Zoom computer that they just want to stay home for that. So we're trying to figure out how that might work best. And fortunately, I think the pandemic is still front and center enough that we need to stay as is with an online model until we get more assurances from the CDC that we can drop our guard. But when we do, we'll have to do that carefully with a bit of a hybrid approach, it feels like, but
Mhm.
open to ideas. Had any other thoughts?
Question about music group.
I guess, so that was me. I guess as you were talking, I just remembered that I was going to listen to see if this was relevant tonight, but since we're almost ended. I just learned, I guess it was through Twitchy Woman, about an organization called Music Men's Minds, and wondered if anybody had ever taken note of that or might have any interest. I guess it's international now because of Zoom, but it's a spouse and her husband, and he had been a very talented pianist and I guess developed dementia that was Parkinson related. And this is the origins of the organization. Anyway, she noticed at some point, she put him in front of the piano. He'd been getting very sullen and somewhat irritable and blah, 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 with a dementia, and his fingers took off on a keyboard. And she was amazed and called the neurologist and said, "What is this? I had no idea he still had any memory," and learned that the musical memory never disappears, that's one part of in a dementia process. Anyway, because of that, she essentially created a band for him, put out a call and had 20 people come. And I think it's maybe 10 years old. And so it's global now because of Zoom. So people have sparked up all over the place who are essentially folks who had played music and who are now finding ways to make music together despite dementia. And the name of their band is The Fifth Dementia. And I watched this video, and for me, the challenge is that, of course, I don't have a music memory and I haven't played an instrument. I dabble. And all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, I wonder how many musicians there are in PD Active, and if anybody has ever just jammed together. And I thought that would be something new in the new year, potentially. And maybe it's already happening, but just another version. And obviously it's different than a tremolos. It's more of a sharing of spirit and talent musically. So
It's a great idea. Joanne mentioned tremolos for everyone's benefit. There's a choral group that we have, tremolos. And so, is it weekly?
yeah,
That's an option, but it's not the musical jam session that you're talking.
right.
We used to have, before I joined, a drum circle of sorts. Didn't we have an instructor that got people around in a circle and banged on bongos?
Yeah, we did that.
Right.
Remember that?
I would love to do that again. Taiko, probably. Do you know about that?
No, this was taiko is more specific and
Right.
instrument specific. This was, if you got a drum of any kind, bring it to the circle and bang on it.
Okay.
Mhm.
And the well, I mean, it's a little bit more structured than that, but the instructor would lay down a beat and we'd all try to keep up with him. And
Mhm.
it was pretty neat. I haven't, interestingly enough, I've not seen that in the survey response feedback, but maybe we should plant the seed anyway.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm doing. Planting a seed. There you go.
Good job, Joanne.
I
I
do
do
know,
know-
do know a drum instructor. That's good. I should.
Mhm.
Okay. Go
I
on.
do know there are other musicians in the PD Active membership group that
Okay.
they're trying to either stay current with their instrument, and in the cases I'm thinking of, they were guitar players, or trying to get back into it.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm a drummer. I've got the drum set right back there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'll keep the beat
We'll,
for you
we'll
if you want.
talk. We'll talk.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds great.
Let's see.
Sounds great.
Chad, anything else you'd like to add before we close?
No, I think this is, great feedback that we've got. It's good to hear
Feedback
from
on
you
the
all.
feedback on the feedback.
Yeah,
Jen, anything else from your perspective?
Yeah, I just want to call out the board members that are here. You heard from Todd and Chad, who've done a lot on this, and Judy, who's our board president, and the other board members who are on are A. Robin, who want to give us a wave, and Judith Lubman, who has her video off. And I saw Suzanne at some point, but I guess she's gone. So this board is incredibly hardworking and gets a lot done. So
Thank you. That's nice. And on that note, we will bid you all farewell and good evening. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for your feedback. I look for that survey to come out in the spring, Chad,
yeah, in the
our
spring.
next survey. And we really value your feedback, and we'll continue to have these sessions to tell you about the action we're taking on your feedback. So thanks, everyone. Have a terrific evening and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.